Yes, Doctor. I'm fighting with the UKM Wi-Fi.
Okay. All right, Barbara, go ahead.
Yeah, it's loading. Is the screen loaded already?
Yes. Just make it slightly bigger.
Okay. So it's not. This is a really I wouldn't say like a perfect draft yet. This is like, I think, yeah, it needs a lot of fixing. So
Just show
I
us the
think
first
for this
paragraph.
part, I'm not sure if I'm doing chapter 4. Yeah, I'm not sure if like I'm doing this chapter 4 correctly by presenting my analysis in like 3 different subtopics based on my research objectives and questions, because I wrote the analysis like this. Like I sectioned it because my research objectives and questions has something to do about looking into the chosen one, and then like looking into the main character's personal motivation and as well as his external motivation that makes him want to fulfill his destiny or his fate as the chosen one in the story. So I sectioned it according to like this is one I wrote. I haven't wrote the other two, and then I sectioned it to, yeah, this one, and then these two, and then I was thinking of like, should there be a discussion section or should this be opted out? Like it's already being discussed in these subtopics. So let me go back to the first paragraph. Yeah, the introduction is not like not great, and it's written
No,
really.
it's actually it's spot on. It's actually spot on. The introduction. Okay, if you look at the introduction, this is for everybody, for Wawa and Aida as well. Huh? So if you look at the introduction introduces the reader to the content of this particular chapter. So you have in the first, you don't call it first subtopic, call it section 4.2 or something like this. Yeah. So you name the section. Okay, in this section, the findings collected will be presented in 3 sections. Section 4.1, 4.2 presents what, section 4.3 presents what, and section 4.4 presents what. Yeah.
All right.
And the summary is actually incorporated in, not the summary, sorry, the discussion, if you like, is incorporated within these sections. So you're right, you don't need a section for discussion, because when you are conducting textual analysis, you are also doing the discussion along with it. So you have excerpts from the text, and you incorporate within the discussion, within the section, any discussion you want to have. And you will also incorporate in each section links to previous studies, meaning whatever you have discussed in chapter 2 and in chapter 3, you will make the connection within this chapter. And then you will have a final section where you conclude your analysis, where you tie up all the issues that you have raised in each section, in each of the 3 sections, you tie it up. But you tie it up still within the corpus. You don't look at the genre, you don't look at what this text suggests in terms of the theme of the chosen one. You focus more on the text and the theme without going outside the text. What I mean by that is you don't look at this text and say something about young adult novels, for instance, right? You talk about the text, you talk about the theme that is presented, you stay in that zone for the conclusion. Then in chapter 5, when you summarize your thesis, you may say certain things in terms of the impact that this reading has had on Rainbow Rowell's narratives, on young adult narratives, on narratives that uses the chosen one as its trope. So what I'm saying is that in chapter 4, the conclusion would be concluding discussions based on issues you have identified, excerpts you have chosen, and the focus of your analysis. But in chapter 5, you take the conclusion of your research, the next step. You take it to the big picture, the macro level, where you make certain statements that shows the impact of your reading, either to the writer's body of work or to the genre from which the writer belongs, or even to the theme that this particular novel you have chosen incorporates, or all three. Okay?
Okay.
Now, another thing that I want to kind of raise to everybody, in chapter 3, after your theoretical and conceptual framework, you have a section called research design or methodology. What that is it's a summary of how the analysis will be conducted. Now, if you look at this paragraph, this is exactly what the research methodology will state. What will you look for in this novel? Which characters will be studied? What would the analysis of the what would the characters be studied for? What aspect of the character and the story will be studied? So if you look at this paragraph, that's what Barbara has incorporated. Okay, first section will look at the character analysis of Simon Snow, the main character of this novel. In the second section, the discussion will incorporate his inner motivations, specifically how his inner motivation helped develop the plot. And in the third section, his relationships with his friends and mentor will be discussed, specifically linking it to the theme of the chosen one. That is what the methodology will say. Oh no, Ida. Okay, Barbara, all right?
Yeah. Is it okay if for this introduction section, it's basically just like I do a minor recap on the methodology?
No. Right now, what you
Or
have here, what you have here is enough. What I'm saying
okay.
is, now you have to work backwards. If you haven't put it in chapter 3, you look at this paragraph, you summarize what you plan to do in chapter 4, and put that as a paragraph in chapter 3, at the end of chapter 3, before you conclude the chapter, under the section called research design or methodology. You can choose either wording. It means how your analysis will be conducted.
I see. All right.
Yeah. So now you're working backwards. So you've already identified it in chapter 4. You know the sections. Now you're going to have to kind of do a summary of it based on what you have here, and put it in chapter 3. So this paragraph stays, it remains, but you also need a more generalized description, which you incorporate in chapter 3. That's all you need to do to add to chapter 3. But this paragraph, this is spot on. But I haven't seen your analysis, so I'm not sure how you have approached your analysis. So but chapter 4, you've got it on, and I think you just need to complete the other two sections, and then let me have a look.
Yeah. I kind of completed I treat this analysis section like I'm writing a literature essay back when I was doing my Form 6 exam, because I took literature and English. So I treat it like I just imagine me writing another essay, like a homework essay, based on the the sections that I have named here. So it doesn't have enough eh, citations to kind of like justify the I think the excerpts, and as well as what I identified from the book yet. But I have to add that on based looking at my chapter 2 and my chapter 3 to substantiate this analysis. So this is basically just like my rough idea on like how I want to write about the chosen one for the main character in this novel. So, looking at the theoretical framework as well that I use in the third chapter, what I have identified from the scholar that I uh, uh, use, the study of that scholar, and as well as some of Joseph Campbell's. I think I wrote Joseph Campbell's, like one of the citations here include his
Heroes
findings
of
about like
Thousand Faces.
that book. Like the description of like what a hero is like in fantasy fiction mostly, or like in stories generally. So what I found out for this analysis is that basically the main character is all his characteristics described in the novel based on the excerpts that I have highlighted in the novel, and then like kind of put it here. I don't know if I don't know if this is the way we should do it for Gaia UKM, where like this is how you put in the excerpt and then you substantiate it with like the justification. Um, but technically, most of the descriptions they are exactly like what uh, the scholar from my theoretical framework and also Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces has described. Like the hero usually, at first, they're at this belief that they are the ones supposed to like save save humanity or save the realm that they are in that story. Or like maybe the hero usually like they lack they are very naive. They lack some sort of like athleticism. They are opposite of what a hero is supposed to be in the beginning, but eventually throughout the story, the hero adopts or harnesses their abilities to eventually fulfill the end goal of the story. And I like the way this novel is sectioned, because it's one whole novel, but it's divided into four books. Like it's sectioned into four books. Like the author made it that way. And I noticed that in every book, like for book one, the entire chapter from chapter 1 to chapter 28 is basically just a description to describe Simon Snow as the chosen one. Like he is the hero for this story, and it helps me a lot. The entire book, the whole 28 chapters, helped me a lot because there's so many evidences that I can use to prove like this deserves to make him belong in the chosen one trope. I mean this character for Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. So
But Barbara, if I can
mhm.
interject, if it is that obvious, then that's not an original research finding. What I mean is,
Oh,
um, we know, for instance, like Harry Potter, we know he is the chosen one because everybody keeps saying it. But the point was, he didn't believe that he was the chosen one. And it was him coming to terms with his position and status. He needed to embrace the idea that he could be the chosen one. It was until he believed in himself enough, then he became the chosen one. So when you say the when you say Rainbow Rowell narrates it in a way that reinforces how Simon Snow is the chosen one, then that is not an original research finding. The reason I say that is because if it is that obvious, then every reader will see that, right? And if it is that obvious, it's because the writer wants to make it obvious. What you want to be able to do is find something that might not necessarily be part of the plot. The fact that Simon Snow is narrated in a way that positions him as a chosen one from the get-go, from the beginning of the story, and the way the story is unfolded already indicates this is not a new thing. This is an accepted, a given. Readers will identify that. But what you want to do is be able to see, okay, this is what the narrator tells us, but how far does Simon himself accepts it or embody it? A lot of the times with the chosen one trope, everybody accepts it, but the person himself or herself, right? In Divergent, the same thing. In Star Wars, the same thing. So, everyone may see it, even the audience may see it, but the conflict is not an external one. The conflict is an internal one, where the individual himself or herself has not come to terms with the idea. In the Matrix, it's the same one. The idea that Neo has not accepted that he is the chosen one. Everybody it's like a given, So with the idea of the chosen one, it's in the same way with the stories of the prophets in biblical times, in scriptures, and even in the Quran, the idea that they didn't set out to be the chosen one. They did not set out to show the world that they are the chosen one, right? In fact, they go into it half-heartedly because they don't think they have what it takes to be the chosen one. So that kind of an inner turmoil is what makes them more grounded. It's not something, if you have ever watched the movie Beauty and the Beast, and the character Gascoigne, he comes across as if he accepts himself to be the hero because he thinks he's good looking, he's got the package, he's built, everybody loves him, and especially the girls fall all over for him. So he comes across as the ideal hero, and yet he's not the hero. So that is the converse in the representation is what makes him the anti-hero. But in this case, with Simon Snow, if everybody accepts it that he is the chosen one, and if he himself thinks of himself as the chosen one, then where is the originality of your research finding? Yeah. So I want you to be able to look at it and ask yourself, what is given, what is obvious, and what are the things that you need to deconstruct in order to get to the heart of the issue? Okay, let's look at this passage that you have identified. I noticed them, children and adults, all trying to look at me. The kids get used to me after a few weeks, but this will be their parents' only chance to get an eyeful. Why did you put this quotation up? What was it about this quotation that you wanted to identify about Simon Snow's character, about how he can be read as the chosen one? So don't just let the excerpt speak for itself. You need to read and you need to deconstruct what is mentioned, what is obvious, and what is also not obvious, what you can infer from the passage. Then it becomes original. Then it becomes impactful. Yeah. The analysis chapter, this is for everybody. Your analysis chapter must reveal something that others might not necessarily see in this, in the text, in the corpus. That way it becomes, number one, it becomes impactful. Number two, it adds to other people's understanding of the corpus that you have chosen, right? And then there will be some kind of a research finding that you can contribute to the body of knowledge on this novel, on this writer, and on the issue that you have identified. If you go down the passage, the page to the next passage. Okay, just let's have a look at this. Before I forget, Gaia UKM. At the end of the passage, you need to put in brackets the page reference for sure. Okay, that's number one. Number two, you need to decide how you will, not there, next to the quote, exactly where the quote ends.
Okay.
Yeah, just at the end of the close
Here.
close inverted commas. Yeah, there. You put the author, the author, the year, and the page. Now, because the entire chapter will be looking at one text, you can decide from the very beginning that every time there is a quote from the novel, you will just mention the name of the novel, either in full or the name of the novel in just its initials. So you decide. You can have the initials of the title. You can have the full title and comma, page where this particular excerpt is from. But for Ida and Wawa, if you are looking at poems from a few different anthology, then you would want to have the names of the anthology clearly marked and then the page. But if the poems come from one similar anthology, and then you do the same as what Barbara is doing here. But anyway, back to this passage. There is a prophecy about me, a few prophecies actually, about a super powerful magician who'll come along and fix everything. The greatest mage, the chosen one, the power of powers. It still feels strange believing that bloke supposed to be me. I don't think anybody expected the chosen one to come from normal world, from mundanity. A March has never been born to normals. Okay. In this passage, yes, you clearly see him coming to terms with the idea that this supposed chosen one is him. But how far does he accept it? How far does he embrace it? Does he reject the idea? Does he question the idea? So that's where you get to discuss. Don't just state the obvious, that this is what he is saying in this passage, because then you're just retelling what is in the passage that you have quoted. Okay, you need to go beyond retelling of what you have quoted to the realm of discussing, analyzing, and even applying what you have identified in chapter 3 to the passage. For instance, in chapter 3, when you talked about the chosen one, when you use Joseph Campbell's The Hero of a Thousand Faces, does the hero accepts that he is a hero when he has to leave for the adventure, when he has to leave his home, to kind of go through this journey? Does the hero look at himself as, I am the hero, I am the savior, I need to go and do all this for my people? because otherwise the people will be destroyed, the society and the families here will be destroyed. Does he accept it of himself, or does he constantly question whether or not he's good enough to be the hero, whether or not he has what it takes to be the hero, whether or not he is worthy for this for this station that is expected of him? So if that's the case, if it is the latter, which is he's constantly questioning, if that is the case, then you can look at this passage and say, the way Simon questions society's expectations and you know, how society positions him as the chosen one, it is very much in line with what scholars have described how the chosen one tends to react. You know, there is a kind of humility, there is a kind of not rejection, but there is a level of questioning. Sorry?
Is it like disbelief?
There definitely a level of disbelief, but after you surpass that, because you cannot be in a state of disbelief for too long, right? So when you say disbelief, where in the passage does he show there is a level of disbelief? Where does that indicate in this passage that you have quoted that there is a level of disbelief? You know, maybe there is something that he says. Maybe there is in his facial gestures, in a more non-verbal kind of a description that the narrator says. So those things will indicate Simon Snow's state of mind when he thinks about himself as the chosen one. Okay? But then, despite rejection, despite not believing himself to be the chosen one, he embraces the challenge that he has to go through. Why is that? Maybe that's his personality. Maybe that's the kind of person he is. Right? So, in your analysis, don't just mention the obvious. Don't just retell whatever you have identified as important passages. Go deeper. Begin to analyze, begin to infer, begin to deconstruct what is in the passage that maybe other readers may not necessarily see. Okay? Do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, I was just jotting down what
Okay,
you
all right.
were saying because it's very important.
Yeah, good. I mean, I'm recording this, so I will send you all a copy. But you are on track. You know, this is the way it should proceed. And if you work on it, and then we'll meet again. Hopefully, when I'm hoping next week you all will be able to show me a little bit more progress, because I don't want to wait until deadline for you all to show me the entire product, because then it's not. You know, it's not a well polished work. I want you all to do something incrementally and progress incrementally. Okay. So Barbara, I'm happy with your progress. You may continue.
Okay, so I guess that's all from me. I'll stop sharing.
Sure. Okay, who's next?
Maybe I can.
Go ahead, Aida. I'm sharing with you all a picture on our WhatsApp group, just to kind of illustrate the idea of small steps. You know, there's a picture of two ladders. One has very close rung from one to another, and another one has the steps quite far from each other. You know, both reaching to the same destination, but in order to reach the destination, you cannot expect to make big leaps. You know, you need to make small steps. So that's what I'm trying to reach for with our consultation. So go ahead, Aida.
Wait, I'm trying to share my screen.
Barbara, if you need to leave for your class, go ahead. Are all of you involved in Dr. Melissa's quiz?
No, me and Ida have LICC quiz, but the due date is 28th of June.
But you don't have class at 11. Ida
No.
and, wow, okay. All right. Okay, go ahead, Ida.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Just make the font slightly, make the page slightly bigger, percentage-wise.
Okay. Okay. All right. I started my chapter 4 with just briefly said about Instagram poetry, and then I also explained about rupee course here, and I said about uh, uh, um, 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 uh, um, why what I'm going to explain in this chapter, which is her first book, the Milk and Honey. Okay. Actually, I decided to study the whole book of Ruby Course, the first one,
Good.
because it previously I just said I want to study a few poems, but then I realized it didn't really suit my research objective and research question. So yeah, I decided to study the whole book,
Good.
and then I begin it with explaining about the first section of the book, which is the hurting, as the section uh, said about more focus about the vulnerability of abused women. And I include the poem. Okay, doctor, I have a question. Actually, when I include these poems, and then I use the plagiarism checker. However, it somehow detect that I plagiarized these poems. So I don't know how I should like code it properly.
What plagiarism app did you use?
Just plagiarism checker.
Okay. Um, uh, if it is, for instance, Turnitin,
Okay.
you can in fact click, there is a button on Turnitin that you can click references and bibliography,
Okay.
meaning anything that is cited, anything that is between inverted commas,
Okay.
the app will not detect as plagiarism.
Oh.
So depending on the application, so some application you may be able to tell the application, the tool, that certain things that are in between inverted commas should not be cited as lifted. You should just ignore it. So
Oh.
it
Okay.
depends on the app. So if it is cited, as long as, well, okay, first of all, let's unpack what is plagiarism. Plagiarism is when you take something consciously, but you do not cite the source. As long as you don't cite the source from which you have taken the passage, you are stealing someone else's ideas and words, right? But once you have cited it within academic confines by identifying the author, the year, and the page, this is not plagiarism. This is showing recognition that this is someone else's source. So I'm not too worried about that as long as the source is there, which is why you need to make sure that every time you take something from anywhere, either you paraphrase this, and if you paraphrase this, you put it in brackets, you put the author's name or surname and then the year. That's it. Yeah. That means, again, you show recognition, but you also show that these are my words. These are not the words of the author.
Oh. All right.
But the minute you use the author's original words, then you put a page reference. That's it.
Oh.
Because
Okay.
ultimately, no idea is originally ours. We're coming up with ideas based on the things that we have read. So when you're doing research, that is actually a strength. The more people you read and the more citations you do in your research, it shows that you are a very good researcher, right? Any piece of work that does not have anyone else's, names or any citations shows that you are a poor researcher. So when you have other people's works incorporated into your research, show off. I always tell my students, make time to show off the number of works that you have read to reach this level of academic writing that you are producing. Don't hide it, right? Sometimes we feel shy because we don't want people to know that actually this is not my idea, this is someone else's idea. Yeah, but you want to be able to identify that in order to show this is the level of research that you are reaching for. Yeah. But in chapter 4, this is for everybody, Wawa, Barbara included. In chapter 4, the findings needs to be original. What does that mean? That means whatever you are saying in chapter 4, it must not be something other people have already said about this writer or about the writer's works. Anything that is not original, that will be in chapter 2. Meaning anything that you are saying about Rupi Kaur, about her works, about her poems, that other people are also saying, you incorporate that in literature review. Okay, the same with Barbara with your corpus, the same with Wawa for your corpus. But if there is something new that you are seeing here, for instance, the line, the pain, however, swiftly moves from the body to the mind, the spirit, or possibly the very essence or core of the feminine self. If this is something you are seeing for yourself and others have not described yet, this is original. This is where it should be it should be kept in chapter 4. Okay, that this idea of pain travels. Rupi Kaur captures how pain travels from one part of the human person to another part, from a physical station, i.e., the body, to a more abstract or immaterial place, the mind. Because where can you travel in the mind or even the spirit? Because that is, insubstantial, right? You cannot describe the physical aspect of the spirit, like where is the spirit, right? And yet Rupi Kaur describes pain as something that travels from the material to the immaterial. So all those things, that would be great research findings. That's where you should put it in chapter 4. But if there was somebody else who have already described Rupi Kaur's portrayal of pain, if there was somebody else, then you have to describe it in chapter 2. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, cool. All right. Is there anything that you want to ask about? I think you're on track. Okay. Can you go back to introductory chapter before I forget? Sorry. Can you go back to introductory paragraph?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Right. This is for Wawa and Barbara as well. Okay. So for now, my suggestion is just write. Don't self-censor. Don't kind of like edit yourself too much. But later, when you are putting together the entire thesis with all the chapters, I will tell you where each one will go. For instance, this paragraph in Ida's chapter 4, this paragraph, as I'm reading this, I feel that this might work better in chapter 1. So I might suggest, Ida, I might suggest later, when we see all 5 chapters, I might suggest that this opening paragraph will serve better as an introduction to the corpus. So I might suggest you put this in chapter 1, maybe part of the introduction, maybe part of the background of study. And then the next paragraph about Rupi Kaur and who she is, and again, This, I feel, may serve better in chapter 1 because you don't want to introduce the reader to the poet in chapter 4. You want to introduce the reader to the poet in chapter 1. Who is Rupi Kaur? How did she make herself known in terms of her poet station as a poet? All that you will describe in chapter 1. So again, I'm not going to ask you to remove it from chapter 4. I'm going to say just write it right now. Then later, when you put together your chapters, it's like you're telling a story. You want the readers to be able to be introduced to the poet slowly, right? Not nothing about the poet, and then suddenly in chapter 4 everything comes together. It's a little bit too late, right? So it's like you telling your story of the research that you're working on. You introduce the poet, the corpus gradually. Okay. So what then goes into chapter 4, the introductory paragraph? You saw what Barbara did just now, the introduction to her chapter 4. That's the kind of thing you need to do. So the introduction for chapter 4 would be, what is this chapter about? What are the key sections in this chapter? What does each section describe? So just one sentence as a summary for each section, and then you go straight into section 1. In order to do that, you need the entire chapter written out, or at least drafted out, right? So I'm not expecting the introductory paragraph yet. Unless you know exactly what you want chapter 4 to be about, you may write the draft of chapter 4 first, and then look at it and then summarize it into the introductory paragraph, which means you may write introduction after you have written the entire chapter. That's okay. Which is why chapter 1 also, you may write chapter 1 after you have finished the entire thesis or the draft of the entire thesis. Okay? But as you look at your friend's work, ask yourself also, how can I improve mine? So maybe have just a bullet there, 4.1, introduction, and then go next, 4.2, the first section of your analysis. Just put the sections there, even if you don't have anything written out yet. Okay?
All right.
Yeah, cool. Anything you want to ask about chapter 4?
Like maybe in my case, the word in this chapter, Rupi Kaur Facebook, was analyzed to identify this, can be used as the introduction.
Yes. Yeah. So I would do that. I would, right now, I would actually take that, put that as section 4.1, and highlight the others so that I know maybe I should put this in chapter 1. I would open up a chapter that says chapter 1, and I would put all these things in chapter 1 right now. So that way you already have the beginnings of chapter 1, and you know what chapter 4 needs to have,
All right.
you know? But a kind of a tip for everybody, keep in mind when you're putting together your thesis, the actual thesis, it is not the same as how you journeyed into your research, right? When you're putting together your research, you may begin with the analysis, you may begin with getting to know the poet, or the writer, you may begin by looking at literature review. But when you're writing the thesis, you are bringing the readers, future readers, into the research by telling them a story. So the story may be about, like, for instance, this paragraph. Rupi Kaur is a young urban Canadian woman in her early 30s who recently gained prominence as an Insta poet. This may be your introduction to your research. If that's the case, I would put this in the background of study in chapter 1. Yeah, because this is a good introduction. Okay, the opening few sentences. What then goes into chapter 4 is more about what this analysis will be about, what this analysis about this poet, about her poems on love and loss and trauma and healing, what will your focus be in this chapter? So go straight to the heart of it. But right now, I will say just write.
Okay.
Don't censor yourself. Whatever you feel needs to go into your own research, put it in. But we will never waste any of the things that you have written. We will just reorganize it so that it is somewhere else where it should be rather than in chapter 4.
Alright.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other question?
Um, Not yet.
So you said you are planning to look at the entire book.
Yeah.
When you have you identified the actual poems that you want to focus on, or are you going to be talking about all the poems? How
Um,
how how
Not
do you
really.
organize your analysis?
Not really because my research objective was um what is the most mentioned harassment in her book, and then how her word really helps people to overcome their fears, like how the poet suits herself as the persona so that the victims can relate to the poems. So what I'm doing right now is just like I basically explain about how the first section, the second section, and third section is going to be like the the content, and then after that I'll start explaining or doing the analysis about the selected poems that shows how how it helps the victims like that.
Good. Good. Yeah, that's brilliant. But again, as I said to Barbara, if other researchers have already done work on Rupi Kaur's representation of trauma, then put it in chapter 2, but identify the gap. What have they not done? Meaning they have discussed her work with regards to trauma, but they have not categorized the various types of trauma and the various levels of trauma in this poem. That's the gap, and this is what your chapter 4 will be about, to uncover that gap. Okay, this is good. You're doing great.
Okay, I have another question.
Yeah.
Okay, what if I have like the same idea with other researchers, but I'm using a different poems from theirs? Is it okay, or is it just still the same?
That's a good point. If another poem reinforces the issue or idea that someone else has said in another research, you have to ask yourself a few things. Does it add to your reading of this poet? Does it answer your research questions? If it does, then bring it in because you want to show that you are making links between the work that you are doing and the findings with previous research. You're not duplicating it. You're not saying the same thing as them, but you are reinforcing what previous studies have done. So then in your chapter 4, after your that bit of the analysis, you will say this point reinforces a previous research done by so and so. So you link your research and your findings with other people's research, but you do not repeat the same point. That means you're not making the same point verbatim. You're not making the same point about the same poem, but you are reinforcing a findings of theirs. Does that answer the question?
Yes. So that means if I'm using like the researchers word, so then it would be my citation for that, because I realized that when doing chapter 4 there's not so much thing to cite.
Again.
Me, if I do relate my research to theirs, So that means I will cite their result or discussion like that, because I realized that when I'm doing chapter 4, there's not so many things that I can cite.
Meaning?
Like maybe what I'm thinking is not the same as the other thinking, so I can't find the citation.
Okay. What matters in chapter 4 is not so much what other people have said. What matters is what you are able to read in Rupi Kaur's poems.
Oh,
Okay? So it doesn't matter if other people, if people might not agree with your reading of Rupi Kaur's poems, it doesn't matter. What matters is there evidence in the poems that you have read to show this is what this poet is doing with her poems?
okay.
Uh, um, like this sentence, huh? Okay. A female self's paternal dilemma is a recurrent motif in Rupi Kaur's work. Is that issue or is that idea, that statement, is that stated in any previous research?
No,
How did you come to that conclusion, or how did you come to that summation that of Rupi Kaur's works?
from the poems, and that's what I understand.
Which poems, and specifically what was the image or in the poems that reinforced this idea that it was the paternal the female self's paternal dilemma? What does that mean, paternal dilemma? What does that mean?
Like how?
Her conflict with her father? What do you mean by that?
Because there's this, I think I didn't include here. Okay, there's one poems where her father like somehow mentally abused her by putting a gap between her father and daughter, to the point that she feel like they are strangers to her father.
So you want to strengthen that by showing evidence. So
Okay.
if it's okay if other readers either don't agree or have not seen Rupi Kaur's poems in this way. That's okay. That's not an issue. You don't need to quote anyone else, but you need to be able to show evidence from the passage, from the poems, as much as you can.
Oh, okay. I mean,
So cite.
I have to put the poems here.
You need to show excerpts from the poems. You don't need to put the entire poem. What you need to show um, is there a statement? Is there an imagery? Is there a line in any of the poems that illustrates this? If so, is this because you say here it's a recurrent motif. So if it is a recurrent motif, that means it happens many, many, many times throughout her anthology. So
Yeah.
you need to be able to show how it is a recurrent motif.
Oh, okay. Maybe like a few adverbs.
For sure.
Oh, alright.
So that means in poem A, in poem B, in poem C, in poem D, like this.
Oh, okay.
Okay? It could be as simple as this, that father figure, or the word father, or any term that she uses for father, maybe in Malay would be bapa or ayah or ba, kan? So how does she refer to it, and how that figure, that paternal figure constantly comes back throughout her poems, and you see it in the mention of the paternal figure. Yeah, so basically that's what's missing lah. So that in itself, Ida, will take up a page, if not more. That description, yeah, because
Alright.
you don't just make that topic sentence and put it there without supporting it, and it is the supporting part of which that makes your analysis more impactful, because the reader then will say, I see where this researcher is making her findings come from. It's from these poems and these images in these poems. So that's why chapter 4 is the heart of your research, because it is where the new findings is being revealed.
Alright.
Okay.
Okay. Uh, okay, and then the second section and the third section, I didn't do much yet. But I'll just do the same like how I did in first section, where I explain and put few adverbs from the poem, then I explain from my POV, and then after that I will start explaining about the what is the most common harassment in throughout her books, and also how her words comfort the victims.
Okay.
That's all from me.
All right. Okay. Wawa?
Okay. So I think I learned a lot from Barbara and Aida's presentation, but let me just show you my screen.
Okay.
Just like Barbara, I also like write something that is very essay.
Based on your literature assignments, huh?
Well, it's not really a literature assignment. It's more like, I feel like writing something. I'm just gonna write down. I haven't even re-edit make the sentence look more okay. It's just very simple ayat. Okay, so the introduction, I'll be asking Barbs for her how she did it.
But you have the
And
recording. You have the recording, so you can
yes, yeah.
always refer to the recording. Yeah.
Okay. So the thing is about my research is that my research objective, the original one is to analyze the difference between the classic fairy tales and the reimagined fairy tales by Nikita Giles. But after doing the chapter 3, I realized I might want to focus more on the gender construct. And when I think I consult with you, doctor, and you suggest that I look through the title, is it? Yeah, the short stories and the poems, and then see which one of the titles talks about gender. So I highlighted the first one is mother, and this is the first story. This is very simple. You could say that. I will analyze it more after this.
Wait. Before you proceed, you say story. I thought,
Short stories.
wasn't it poems?
Yeah, it's poems and short stories because I didn't
Okay.
listen.
Okay. So with Nikita Gill, you are looking at both her prose and her poetry.
Yep, that
All
is
right.
right.
Cool.
Okay. So the first one is Cinderella. Mother sends a message from heaven. I for this part, it kind of relates to my chapter 3 because you know how mothers are being stereotyped as very self-love, devoted, something like that. So this is the what do you call it? The citation. I might want to read it again because this is the copy paste version. I have actually put related to my research yet. Okay, the next one is the stepmother still. Continuation from the Cinderella story. Instead, I do have a question, doctor. Do you think it's a bit too much if I put two research objectives? The first one is analyzing Nikita Fierce fairy tale based on gender construct, and the other one is to differentiate the classic fairy tales and the reimagination one. Is it a lot to analyze?
That's a good question. If the research objectives are related to each other, if they if they add to one another towards a bigger aim, that's okay. But if they are focusing on two contrasting or two distinct areas, then it would be too much.
Okay,
So
because
read to me your first objective again.
the first one is to analyze the gender construct present in fierce fairy tale, and the second one is to differentiate between the classic fairy tales and the reimagination fierce fairy tale.
Yeah, that is two different objectives.
Because
However, you can kind of
mention it.
you can reword the first one by looking at, when you say you want to analyze the gender construction, you may say how you want to look at gender construction, how gender is reimagined, or how gender is reconstructed. That means in your methodology, you describe how gender construction is within a patriarchal society, or within fairy tale, a classic fairy tale, how gender is constructed. The women are either the evil witch, the stepmother. So basically, one end of the continuum or the other end of the continuum. Soft spoken, pretty, fair, sings melodiously. So she is either the damsel in distress or she is the witch and the temptress. So she's either one extreme, expecting the prince to come and help her, or she's another extreme, that she's a menace to society, right? So this is how gender is constructed in classic fairy tales.
Yeah.
Then you look at your analysis, and then you want to show how gender is revisioned in these fairy tales by Nikita Gill. Then you can do that. So don't do two separate things. Do, like, bring it together. Bring it together in the way it is studied in your research. That way you get to do both.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay.
Yeah.
Because for this part, I talk about the stepmother stereotype, as well as I insert a little bit about how the original story. They didn't say anything about the stepmothers, why she is like that, why she is so evil. She treated Cinderella so badly. This, I don't know how to do it, but right now I think I know better.
Good.
So from Ida's and Barb's consultation just now, I think I might need to insert the poetry as well.
Okay.
And this is only the Cinderella story. I took the mother, the stepmother, as well as the two misunderstood stepsisters as well. And that's just it. So the thing is, the other question is, since you told me to analyze the whole book, I just need to refresh my mind again. Did you say I have to analyze all of the poetries or just some of the poetries?
Okay. Now, you see, you're already in at the end of page 3, and you've only gone through one story so far, right?
Yeah.
So that being the case, you may find that as you're writing your chapter 4, you may find that, you know what, I can't do justice to this person's work by focusing on a little bit of everything. Rather, I want to only focus on her prose, or I want to focus only on these particular fairy tales. So as you're writing chapter 4, you may find that you will limit the scope of your studies. This will come in chapter 1 when you describe the scope of your study. Are you looking at Nikita Gill's entire body of work? Are you looking at her particular collection? Are you looking at one aspect of her collection? So you can fine tune it. You can rework your scope as you are doing your analysis. That's okay. Don't worry about it. It's not like once you have decided you have to stick to it and you can't change that. It's not like that. Either the same with yourself. you may start off wanting to do her entire collection of poems, and then you may realize that as you write your analysis, you will find that you have identified, certain themes, and it's only those themes that appear more prominent, and those are the ones you are focusing on. So again, your scope will be reworded accordingly. So it's very much going back and forth, from chapter 1 to chapter 3, looking at your conceptual framework and methodology, then coming back to your analysis, and then looking at chapter 1, 4 and 3, and then going to chapter 1, looking at your research objectives, research questions, looking at your scope of study. So when you are writing the thesis, it is going back and forth. But when the reader is reading your thesis, it flows as if it's a story is being told. It looks very seamless, but when you are writing it, it's not seamless. You don't finish chapter 1 and then go to chapter 2 and then go to chapter 3 and then go to chapter 4 and then voila, chapter 5, you're done. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so that is something I want you to establish now, so that you realize it's okay. I can go back to the file that says chapter 1 and work on a little bit, and then come back to chapter 4 and then go to chapter 3. It's usually chapter 2 that is set. You don't touch it anymore because you've done the background of study.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for instance, when you say you want to look at, when you want to analyze how gender is revisioned, how gender construction is revisioned, you may rework chapter 4 not by looking at particular stories, but by looking at particular gender construction. For instance, the stepmother's, the construct of the stepmother, or the construct of the stepsisters.
Okay.
So you use the actual gender construction as the focus of each section of your chapter 4. Right now, you use the actual story as the divisions for each section, right? So what I'm suggesting to you is, don't let the story be the focal point of your analysis. Let the construction of the female characters, or male characters and female characters, let that be the focus of your analysis. That way, when you are describing your research design in chapter 3, research design or methodology in chapter 3, you can say that the way you will analyze Nikita Gill's prose is by focusing on 5 key gender representation: stepmother, the stepsister, something else, something else, something else.
Okay.
And anytime the stepmother figure appears, either in any of her poems in this collection or any of her short stories, you bring it up.
Okay. All right, doctor. Thank you. Wait. So and I think so. Since I might only have one research objective, is it okay to sub my topic like this based on the, what do you call it? The poems and short stories.
Again, the stepmother's tale, is that the name of the story or the poem? Or like I said, I wouldn't let the particular text be the section. I would use the issue that I am trying to discuss as the section.
Oh, okay.
Which means in this section, you can talk about any story revolving around the stepmother figure.
Okay. I understand. So basically, like, if I want to put something like mother, I just put every topic, not every topic, every short stories that talks about mother in one subtopic.
Yes.
Okay, I understand. Thank you, doctor.
Welcome. Is that it?
Yeah, I think that's about it. I think I understand a lot better now.
Because if we meet more regularly like this, you will, the picture that I shared with you all on the WhatsApp that I just shared, small steps. Think about it as small steps. Don't worry too much where it's going to go. It will go to the end. You will finish it. This too will pass. Right now, it is very overwhelming because you are seeing the whole thing. But if you just break it down and say, right now, today, Thursday, 24th of June, 11:30, I'm only focusing on my chapter 4 on this section with Dr. Rai. That's it. Done? Okay, then go and do something else, like that. Okay? So breathe, do one thing at a time, and take breaks and give yourself some treats. Okay? All right. And meet me regularly. No matter how busy you get, make time to meet me regularly. Even if you're like, look, I'm really confused. I'm looking at this poem and I'm not sure how to proceed. And this is my research objective, but I can't seem to get through it. Talk. You need the consultation to help you through it. Don't try to carry the burden on your own shoulders because that's too much for anyone. Okay? Any other question?
As of now, I don't think I have one.
Yeah.
Okay, I do like um we have to submit the video presentation to you, right? And previously we didn't submit the chapter 1, 2, and 3. So during the next video presentation, we have to include like from 1 to 5.
Yes. Yes. Because you see, there's no point if last semester you submitted something and you have reworked it now. Okay, because we are constantly reworking it. That's the nature of our literature research. Different from qualitative, quantitative research. So I'm not going to expect you to have done something last semester just to meet a deadline. But I know you have progressed. I know because I've seen you, I've talked to you, you've shown me some of your work. So for the final product, you have two final products. One is the video, which then can be used to promote the types of research being done in the ELS program by the undergraduates, right? Which means it needs to be a more completed piece of work, right? And the other is the actual thesis. Yeah. But what's the deadline again? I forget. Shall I check?
It's 14th of July.
Yeah. So you
2
have
days before.
just over 3 weeks. Yeah. But by then, you will have your core of your research, in terms of problem statement, research questions, research objective, a little bit of the review of literature, method, conceptual framework, methodology, and your analysis. Yeah. But meet me next week. Meet me regularly next week. Okay? Yeah, does this help meeting as a group or do you want to meet individually?
I think for me, meeting as a group works better because you don't have to repeat something twice.
That's one, but also I think sometimes your friends are best teachers for you
True.
because they are learning the rope as they go, as are you, and their learning moments and experience is also something you get to learn. But the same with you, your learning moments is something that benefits them. So I think group consultations also is good, but in between, if you need to ask me anything specific and you want to meet me, please do that. I will make time. It's say if you want to meet me Monday or Tuesday or whatever, even if it's just lunchtime meeting for about 20 minutes, that's not a problem. So until we get the analysis chapter more concrete, you may need to meet me more times, but that's okay. Okay. All right. Anything else?
Nothing for me.
Ida, anything else?
No, no.
Okay. I will make this recording available. I'm going to stop the recording now. I think you all are progressing well. I know it feels stressful right now, but it's coming together. Okay?